The air crackled with an eerie energy as Jinwoo stood atop the ruins of a forgotten battlefield, his shadow soldiers swirling around him like living darkness. The sky above was an unnatural shade of crimson, split by jagged fissures that pulsed with otherworldly light. He had been summoned here, no, dragged by forces beyond his understanding. His instincts screamed danger, but his eyes burned with determination. Whatever awaited him, he would face it head on. Across the shattered landscape, figures emerged from the swirling dust. Their armor was ancient, etched with runes that glowed with a power long lost to time. These were warriors from another era, legends who had once walked the earth as conquerors. Their leader, a towering man wielding a spear crackling with lightning, stepped forward. His voice boomed like thunder. "You are not of our age, yet you stand before us as if you belong. Who are you to challenge the might of the Valmorian Legion?" Jinwoo smirked, flexing his fingers as shadows coiled around his arms. "Just a hunter doing his job." His tone was casual, but his body was coiled tight, ready to explode into motion. He had faced gods and monsters alike. What were a few ancient warriors to him? The battle erupted in an instant. The Valmorian warriors moved with inhuman speed, their weapons carving through the air like extensions of their bodies. Jinwoo dodged a sweeping axe strike, countering with a flick of his wrist. A blade of pure darkness materialized in his grip, slicing upward and forcing his attacker to leap back. Another warrior lunged, his sword wreathed in flames, but Jinwoo sidestepped and drove his elbow into the man's ribs, sending him crashing into a crumbling pillar. The leader snarled and thrust his spear forward. Lightning arced toward Jinwoo, but shadows surged from the ground, intercepting the attack in a burst of sizzling energy. Jinwoo's eyes gleamed violet as he activated Dominator's touch, his power reaching out to seize control of the battlefield. The shadows beneath the warriors writhed, tendrils snapping around their legs and dragging them down. One warrior roared as he was swallowed whole, vanishing into the abyss. But these were no ordinary foes. The leader roared, his body erupting in golden light as his muscles swelled, his armor reforging itself into something grander, a transformation of pure battle fury. "You dare use dark arts against the chosen of Valmor? We who have felled empires?" His spear split the earth as he charged, each step shaking the ground. Jinwoo grinned. Finally, a real fight. He met the charge head on, their weapons colliding in a shockwave that shattered the ruins around them. The force of the impact sent both skidding back, but neither faltered. Jinwoo's heart pounded, not from fear, but exhilaration. These warriors were strong, stronger than any S-rank hunters he had faced. And that only made the hunt more thrilling. As the dust settled, the leader raised his spear to the sky, and the crimson clouds above responded, gathering into a swirling vortex. Jinwoo's instinct screamed a warning. This wasn't just a battle anymore, it was a war between eras, and only one would walk away. His fingers tightened around his blade. "Let's see what you've got." The battlefield trembled as Jinwoo's shadow soldiers clashed against the ancient warriors, their weapons ringing like a storm of steel. The air crackled with mana, the ground splitting under the force of their blows. Jinwoo's eyes narrowed as he assessed the tide of battle. These weren't mere mindless foes. They moved with precision, their tactics honed over centuries. One of the warriors, a towering figure clad in bone armor, lunged forward, his spear aimed straight for Jinwoo's heart. Jinwoo sidestepped, summoning Kamish's dagger in a flash of black light. The blades met with a deafening clang, sparks flying. But before he could counter, a second warrior, this one wielding twin curved swords, sliced toward his flank. Jinwoo barely twisted away in time, feeling the wind of the strike graze his ribs. His shadows surged forward, intercepting the attackers, but the warriors cut through them like paper. A voice echoed in his mind, "Igris. My king, they adapt. They learn." Jinwoo gritted his teeth. These weren't just relics of the past. They were evolving. Then, the earth split open. A third force emerged, monstrous beasts, their bodies woven from shadow and flame. Jinwoo's pulse spiked. These weren't his shadows. They were something else, something hostile. The beasts turned on both sides, their jagged claws tearing into warriors and shadows alike. A new threat. Jinwoo cursed under his breath. He couldn't fight two fronts at once. Just as the beasts closed in, a streak of silver cut through the chaos. A figure landed beside him, a woman clad in sleek armor, her sword humming with energy. "You look like you needed help," she said, smirking. Jinwoo didn't recognize her, but he didn't have time to question. The beasts lunged. The woman moved like lightning, her blade carving through the creatures with blinding speed. Jinwoo didn't hesitate, he capitalized on the opening, darting forward to engage the bone-armored warrior again. This time, he feinted left, then pivoted, slashing upward with Kamish's dagger. The warrior blocked, but Jinwoo's free hand shot out, summoning a dozen shadow spears from the ground beneath them. The warrior staggered, impaled. But he didn't fall. Instead, his wounds healed, the flesh knitting back together. Jinwoo's stomach dropped. Regeneration? The silver-armored woman cursed. They're feeding off the beast's energy. Jinwoo's mind raced. If the warriors and the beasts were linked, then... A guttural roar cut his thoughts short. The largest of the beasts, a hulking monstrosity with glowing red eyes, charged straight for them. The woman braced, but Jinwoo acted first. He yanked the shadows from the fallen creatures, weaving them into a massive black lance. With a grunt, he hurled it. The lance struck true, piercing the beast's chest, but instead of dying, it absorbed the shadow, growing larger. The woman's eyes widened. That's not possible. Jinwoo didn't wait. He pulled on the shadow inside the beast, reclaiming it with a violent jerk. The creature howled as its body destabilized, then exploded into dark mist. The warriors faltered, their regeneration stuttered. A weakness. Hit them now. Jinwoo barked. The woman didn't need to be told twice. She blurred forward, her sword a silver streak, cleaving through two warriors in one stroke. Jinwoo's shadow swarmed the rest, tearing them apart before they could recover. Silence fell, brief, heavy. The woman turned to him, panting. We're not done yet. Jinwoo followed her gaze. The ground trembled again. A rift tore open in the sky, and from it, a colossal figure descended, a warrior clad in gold, his presence suffocating. The woman's smirk vanished. Oh, hell. Jinwoo tightened his grip on his dagger. The real battle was just beginning. The air crackled with energy as Jinwoo stood amidst the ruins of a forgotten battlefield, his shadow soldiers forming an impenetrable wall around him. The ancient warriors, clad in armor that gleamed under the pale moonlight, advanced with eerie precision. Their leader, a towering figure with eyes like smoldering embers, raised his sword, and the ground trembled. Jinwoo's grip tightened around his dagger, his mind racing. He had faced countless foes, but these warriors were different, their movements were synchronized, their attacks relentless, as if they shared a single mind. The battle erupted in a storm of steel and shadows. Jinwoo darted between strikes, his agility unmatched, but even he couldn't evade every blow. A spear grazed his side, drawing blood, and he hissed through clenched teeth. His shadows retaliated, swarming the warriors, but their blades passed harmlessly through the enemy's armor as if it were smoke. Jinwoo's eyes widened. Illusions? No, their forms flickered, shifting between solid and intangible. A cold realization settled in his gut. These warriors weren't just from another era, they were phantoms, bound by a curse far older than he'd imagined. Then came the voice, a whisper that slithered into his mind. You cannot kill what is already dead, Shadow Monarch. The leader's lips didn't move, yet the words echoed with mocking clarity. Jinwoo's pulse spiked. How did they know his title? Before he could react, the ground beneath him erupted, and skeletal hands burst forth, dragging him down. His shadows fought to free him, but the warriors pressed their advantage, their weapons aimed at his heart. Desperation fueled his next move. With a roar, he unleashed a pulse of dark energy, forcing them back, but the effort left him panting. A figure emerged from the chaos, a familiar face. Cha Hei-in, her sword gleaming, cut through the spectral ranks to reach his side. Jinwoo. We need to fall back, she shouted, her voice strained. Relief flickered in his chest, but it was short-lived. As she turned to face the enemy, her blade faltered, and Jinwoo saw it, the faint glow in her eyes, the same as the warriors. His blood turned to ice. Hei-in? She didn't respond. Instead, her sword swung toward him. He barely dodged, his mind reeling. Betrayal? No, possession. The realization hit like a hammer blow. The enemy wasn't just fighting him, they were turning his allies against him. The battlefield became a nightmare. Jinwoo's shadows hesitated, torn between protecting him and attacking their possessed comrades. His chest ached, not from wounds, but from the crushing weight of helplessness. He couldn't strike her down. He wouldn't. Gritting his teeth, he reached deep into his power, summoning every ounce of strength. If I can't kill them, he muttered, then I'll break the curse. The air around him darkened as shadows coalesced into a massive spear, thrumming with raw energy. With a final, desperate lunge, he drove it into the earth, unleashing a shockwave that rippled through the battlefield. The warriors staggered, their forms flickering violently. Hei-in collapsed, the glow fading from her eyes. Jinwoo caught her before she hit the ground, his hands trembling. Hang on, he whispered. But the victory was Pyrrhic. The enemy leader laughed, his voice now a chorus of 1,000 whispers. You've only delayed the inevitable. The gate is already open. Jinwoo followed his gaze to the horizon, where a colossal rift tore through the sky, bleeding darkness into the world. The true battle was just beginning, and this time, he might not be enough to stop it. The air crackled with tension as Jinwoo stood amidst the ruins of an ancient battlefield, his shadow soldiers forming an impenetrable wall around him. Across the desolate plain, the warriors of a forgotten era emerged from swirling portals, their armor gleaming under the dim light of a fractured sky. These were no ordinary foes, each carried the weight of centuries, their auras suffocating even the bravest of souls. The first to strike was the massive Axeman, his weapon cleaving the earth as Jinwoo barely sidestepped, the shockwave sending debris flying. Jinwoo countered with a flurry of dagger strikes, but the warrior's reflexes were inhuman, parrying each blow with ease. The clash of steel echoed as Jinwoo's muscles burned, his body pushed to its limit. He needed an edge. With a mental command, his shadow surged forward, swarming the Axeman, but the ancient warrior roared, his aura flaring as he shadowed the dark figures with a single sweep. Jinwoo's breath came ragged, but he grinned. This is what I've been waiting for. He activated Dominator's touch, his veins flooding with raw power. His speed tripled, blurs of motion as he closed the distance, landing a devastating kick to the warrior's ribs. Bone cracked, but the enemy barely staggered, retaliating with a backhand that sent Jinwoo skidding across the ground. Blood trickled from his lip, but his eyes burned with determination. Before he could recover, a hail of arrows rained down, courtesy of the elven archer perched atop a crumbling pillar. Jinwoo twisted midair, summoning Shadow Exchange to swap places with a distant shadow, narrowly avoiding the lethal volley. But the archer wasn't done, her next shot glowed with cursed energy, homing in on him. Jinwoo barely raised Kamish's wrath in time, the impact sending a jolt through his arms. He needed to adapt. Focusing his mana, Jinwoo unleashed Ruler's authority, the gravitational force slamming the archer into the ground. But before he could finish her, the spearman intervened, his thrusts a deadly dance of precision. Jinwoo weaved through the strikes, but one grazed his shoulder, drawing blood. The pain sharpened his focus. He feinted left, then spun low, his dagger carving a deep gash across the spearman's thigh. The warrior hissed but didn't falter, countering with a spinning slash that forced Jinwoo back. The battle raged, neither side yielding. Jinwoo's shadows regrouped, harrying the warriors, buying him precious seconds. His mind raced, these enemies were stronger, faster, more skilled than any he'd faced. But he had something they didn't, evolution. With a roar, Jinwoo activated Monarch's domain, the battlefield darkening as his power surged. His wounds knit together, his muscles bulged with newfound strength. The Axeman charged again, but this time, Jinwoo met him head-on, their collision shaking the earth. He grabbed the warrior's wrist, twisted, and snapped it with a sickening crunch. The Axeman howled, but Jinwoo wasn't done, his knee shot up, crushing the warrior's helmet and sending him crashing to the ground. The elven archer loosed another arrow, but Jinwoo snatched it mid-air and hurled it back, piercing her shoulder. She cried out, but the spearman was already upon him, his weapon a silver blur. Jinwoo ducked, rolled, and sprang up with a spinning kick that sent the warrior reeling. He pressed the advantage, summoning Baruka's dagger and driving it deep into the spearman's side. The warriors were weakening, but so was Jinwoo. His breaths came in ragged gasps, his body screaming for respite. Yet he couldn't stop, not when the final warrior, the mage, raised his staff, the air humming with apocalyptic energy. A storm of black lightning erupted, engulfing Jinwoo. Pain seared through every nerve, but he gritted his teeth, pushing through. His shadows were incinerated, his armor scorched. But he wouldn't fall. With the last of his strength, Jinwoo lunged, closing the distance in an instant. The mage's eyes widened as Jinwoo's dagger found his throat. The spell fizzled, the battlefield falling silent. Jinwoo collapsed to one knee, his body battered but victorious. The ancient warriors lay defeated, their era finally put to rest. But as the dust settled, a new presence loomed, something far worse. The real battle was just beginning. The air crackled with residual energy as Jinwoo stood amidst the ruins of the battlefield, his breath ragged, his shadow soldiers flickering like dying embers around him. The ancient warriors, legendary figures from a forgotten era, circled him, their weapons gleaming with otherworldly power. Their leader, a towering figure clad in obsidian armor, raised his greatsword, its edge humming with dark energy. "You fight well, mortal," the warrior rumbled, "but this ends now." Jinwoo wiped blood from his lip, his muscles screaming in protest. Every movement sent waves of agony through his body, but his eyes burned with unyielding defiance. He had pushed himself beyond human limits, yet the ancient warriors matched him blow for blow. This wasn't just a battle of strength, it was a clash of eras, of wills. And he refused to lose. The obsidian-armored warrior lunged, his great sword carving through the air like a black comet. Jinwoo barely dodged, twisting midair as the blade gouged the earth where he'd stood. Shadows surged from his body, forming jagged spears that shot toward his enemy, but the warrior shattered them with a single swing. Jinwoo gritted his teeth. Fast. Too fast. His usual tactics weren't working. He needed something more. A whisper echoed in his mind, the voice of the Shadow Monarch, the power that had elevated him beyond humanity. "You are my successor," it murmured. "But to win, you must become more." Jinwoo's heart pounded. He had resisted fully embracing the monarch's authority, fearing the loss of his humanity. But now, with the fate of his world hanging in the balance, hesitation was a luxury he couldn't afford. With a roar, Jinwoo unleashed everything. His shadows erupted like a tidal wave, swallowing the battlefield in darkness. The ancient warriors staggered, their movements sluggish as the inky tendrils coiled around them. Jinwoo's body burned as his power surged beyond its limits, his veins alight with raw energy. He could feel his very soul straining. This was it. The final push. The obsidian warrior snarled, breaking free of the shadows with a burst of crimson energy. "You dare defy time itself?" he bellowed, charging forward. Jinwoo met him head-on, their weapons colliding in a shockwave that shattered the ground beneath them. Sparks flew as steel clashed, each strike sending tremors through the battlefield. Jinwoo's arms trembled under the force, but he refused to yield. Then, he saw it. A split-second opening. The warrior's overconfidence, his reliance on sheer power, left him vulnerable. Jinwoo feinted left, then pivoted, driving his dagger deep into the warrior's unguarded side. The ancient warrior gasped, his eyes widening in disbelief as dark energy erupted from the wound. Jinwoo didn't stop. He summoned every last ounce of strength, his fists slamming into the warrior's chest, releasing a devastating blast of shadow that consumed him. The battlefield fell silent. The remaining ancient warriors froze as their leader disintegrated into motes of fading light. Without his presence, their forms wavered, their connection to this era severed. One by one, they dissipated, their weapons clattering uselessly to the ground. Jinwoo collapsed to one knee, his body spent. The cost of victory was steep, his vision blurred, his limbs numb. But he had done it. He had defied fate itself. Around him, the shadows stirred, their loyalty unwavering even in his exhaustion. As the dust settled, the world itself seemed to shift. The rift between eras sealed, the timeline stabilizing. The universe had been altered, no longer would ancient forces threaten the present. Jinwoo's actions had rewritten the future, ensuring humanity's survival. But as he stared at his trembling hands, he knew the true battle was only beginning. The power he had embraced came with a price. The Shadow Monarch's influence was growing within him, and the line between man and monarch blurred. Somewhere in the distance, a single crow cawed, its cry echoing across the ruined land. Jinwoo exhaled slowly, his breath misting in the cold air. The fight was over, for now. But the shadows never slept. And neither would he.